think we are good. I look. Yep, we are live. All right, outstanding. Welcome everybody. It's Tuesday, and that means it's time for another exciting edition of the Bench Doctor. We still don't have all the parts for the trench gun, so in our usual tradition, we're going to make some stuff up, and I believe Scott is going to tell us all about the Beretta 92. So I'm going to make the introductions to everybody. We've got folks monitoring the Zoom. So if you're live in the class, feel free to ask questions right there. Otherwise, if you're joining us on any of the other streams, except for Discord, please get to Discord. We don't have folks monitoring Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch. So your questions may go unanswered, and for that, we apologize. But drop your questions in our Discord channel. It is members only. So that's a good reason to join the club, so that you can berate and harass Scott in real time. You'd also get the invite to come to the live Zoom and do it really in real time, as opposed to by proxy from our moderators. Kyle and Danny and Lonnie are going to be moderating for us tonight. And on that note, I think I've gotten all the business out of the way.
Yeah, somebody want to post the link for Discord? Somebody just asked.
Yeah, we can drop that. We can drop that for you in the Zoom right now. And but if you're in the Zoom, you don't need it until we're done. And without further ado, unless I've missed anything, Scott, what are you going to talk to us about tonight?
All right. Well, tonight we're going to go over the 92 series and the M9, basically the same gun with a few minor variations. But before we get to that, I got an interesting project. A friend of mine, one of our local chapter members here in Oregon, has this beautiful old Winchester 94, and you know, it looks to be in great shape. She had one slight problem, and if you watch the hammer, it's all the way back. I can move it with my finger. I can drop it with my finger. I can push it off of the hammer notch like that. The trigger pull on it is so light. It's oh, I got to pull that. It's less than a pound. So this is what happens if you do a trigger job and have no idea what you're doing. This is when somebody has removed far too much material. I thought it was interesting because we were talking about AR triggers a couple of weeks ago. And when people mess around and remove too much material, that's what you end up getting. This gun is terrifying. The other day I had it on the bench with the hammer back, and I was just tapping the barrel and the hammer dropped. So be careful, kids. So I'm going to have to go in here and take this gun apart again and replace the hammer and the sear, and then probably fit them and stone them to get her a good smooth trigger pull. And this gun was made before 1964. So yeah, and they changed some of these parts in 1964. So you have to be careful, or you know, what parts you order and what shape they're in, because most of them are used. So you have to make sure that somebody hasn't butchered it before you order it. But anyway, just kind of neat. I was thinking maybe after next week we're going to do an AMA. I was thinking the week after, if this gun's still here, I might just tear it down right here on the bench. And because I know a lot of people are interested in these. We kind of did a Marlin 336, but the Winchester 94 is a real common gun. And you know, it's kind of neat to take apart a lever action gun and see how they go together. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. But today's subject is the Beretta 92 series of guns. This is an M9. It's the same configuration that the U.S. military used from '86 until just earlier this year. It's basically a 92 FS, except it has a rail here. You know, sort of so you can mount a light or you know, laser, whatever you want on there. There's other variations of this. There's the 92D. There's the G model. The 92S, which you see in surplus a lot. I had one of those. I sold it recently, where you can tell the 92S because instead of having the mag release up here where we're traditionally used to seeing it, it's down here. but that's the biggest difference. That and the locking lugs are a little bit different in the older models. But essentially they're the same gun, and most of the parts will bolt right up. And if you have a 92S, you could still get magazines for them. If you look at the new Beretta mags on Beretta's website, this is where the notch is for the mag release on the later guns, the 92FS and the M9s.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah.
could you go further over your wooden? There you go. Yeah, if you keep going that way, you'll be more centered. Thank you.
Okay. So this notch is for the modern guns up, up where we're used to seeing the mag release. But if you see this sort of horseshoe notch down here, this has been notched for the 92S guns. So the actual Beretta made magazines with this lower notch will work in the 92S guns. A lot of people complain that they can't get magazines for those older ones, but they still make them. They're compatible, backward compatible. Anyway, so first I'm going to kind of walk you through the manual of arms for this thing. It's a hammer fired single action, double action.
Bring it towards the hammer. You're out of frame.
More to your left, Scott.
There you go.
All right. So it's a single action, double action. And if you're not familiar with what that means, so single action is when I do that, the hammer's back, the trigger's ready, like that. Okay. Double action is when I pull the trigger and it cocks the hammer and then releases it. So it's doing two functions instead of just one. In single action, all it's doing is dropping the sear off the notch and sending the hammer forward versus cocking it and then doing the trigger release. So anyway, it's a SADA gun. Most of the time they're carried with the FS guns have a safety. So what it does is if it's in safe, it deadens the trigger. So the trigger is just inert. It'll move back and forth, but it won't do anything. So you have to flip it back up into fire, and then it will work. But this one I've converted. I've done a couple of upgrades to it. I did what was called the G lever conversion, which removes the safety and makes it a decocker only. So if this gun is cocked, that just decocks it, and now it's in double action mode. So it'll work in double action mode. So instead of a safety deadening the trigger, it just makes the first trigger pull double action. So that's called a G lever mod. It's not a hard thing to do. It's tedious because you have a couple of little tiny detents and springs, and there's a little wound spring inside here that you have to get one leg up into this arm, and it's a real fun one to try to do the first time. And then when you're putting in this detent right here and locks in down here, you need basically 3 hands because you have to push up on this from below, and then you have to push in, and then you have to depress the detent. I could next time I do one, I'll have to film it and show you how to the trick I've learned to doing these, but that's going to be on the scope. The other thing that I've done is I put what's called a trigger in a bag kit in this. It's sold by Langdon Tactical, and it comes with this trigger bar. It comes with a trigger. It comes with a new sear and all new internal springs. And you basically turn the gun down as far as you can, and then putting all those things back in, and it makes for a super smooth, crisp trigger. I wish I could show you, how smooth the trigger is on this gun, but anyway, I recommend those two upgrades if you want to spend the money. It's not cheap. The G lever mod's about $50. That's well worth it. The trigger in a bag is a couple hundred, and probably an evening of your time to figure it out. And the G lever mod comes with extra springs and detents because there's 100% chance you're going to lose one. They're just miserable. There's a little tiny one right here, comes in right there, and there's one right here, and there's little tiny springs in there. And like I said, it's kind of a 3-handed operation, and you're just going to slip and lose one. And they're rounded, so it makes it even less fun because it seats like a ball bearing instead of a point, like an AR D10 does. But you know, all of these guns kind of operate on the same principle. They all work the same way. This one, of course, is unloaded, as you can see. Nothing in the chamber. Mag well is empty. To break one down, you press on this lever right here, right above your trigger guard, and then you push down on this, and that releases the slide. So that's the slide removed from the frame. From here, it's probably similar to what you're used to. You pull the guide rod out, and the recoil spring and the barrel just lifts right out like that. And that's pretty much all you would do to one of these to field strip it. You know, there's not much reason to go much deeper into these. But if you're going to do the trigger job in a bag, you're going to get down in here and get this little trigger spring, this trigger bar, there's a spring in here. And you're going to replace the sear, which is up in here. So you're going to take all of this stuff off. I will tell you, there is one mod you can do to these guns that's cheap and super easy. And it's called a D spring. It's this spring right here, the hammer spring. It's up inside the mag well, and it will change your double action trigger pull. So when you unholster your gun, you're going to more than likely be in double action mode, and that double action trigger pull can be pretty stiff on these guns. The single action, once it's fired the first shot, is pretty smooth. So most people want to take a few pounds off of that double action trigger pull, and the way to do it is to just order a D spring from Wilson Combat or Langdon or Beretta themselves, and they're cheap. They're like $5 or $6, and I'm going to show you how to do it real quick because it's very, very easy and it's really worth doing. So I'm going to set these parts out of my way for the time being. I'm going to remove my grips. That's one thing you're going to need to do. Let me find the right tip. And these, I have, this is another little tip I'll show you here on these. If you have grip panels like this that where the grip screws are constantly coming loose, you can get little tiny O-rings. And I don't know if you see it right here, there's an O-ring. You just put those little tiny O-rings over the screw, and then as you screw it in and compress it, it adds a little more grip to hold these screws in place and they don't back out. Oftentimes people will take these screws and Loctite them, which then makes it a bear to get off. So just find some little tiny O-rings. You can find them.
Scott.
Yeah.
How much does a D spring cost?
It's $5 or $6 on. It's less than $20.
Okay.
I'd be surprised if it was anywhere near 20.
Great.
And it's a super easy thing to do. So I'm going to take my grip panels off. Set this aside. And I have a friend that I robbed my gun of the G-lever spring for her because she competes with hers. And I did the upgrade for her a year ago, and she wore that spring out. And I said, geez, how many rounds? 25,000 rounds in 1 year through one of these guns. And that's all that needed doing was that little spring. So it's a testament to how durable and solid these guns are. So your G-lever spring, your D spring is right up in here, kind of like a 1911. You know, you have this hump in the back. To get it out, I'm just going to take a little punch. Let me find the right one, reaching across here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on the frame, which will compress. You can see that move there. So what I want to do is I want to push the frame down into the bench top to unload or load that spring up a little bit. And I'm going to push this pin out. So it should be pretty easy to just pop that pin out like that. Okay. So then this piece, that's the spring cap here. You just slide your old spring out, put your new spring in, and you'll notice there's a leg in here. I don't know if this is coming through, but you'll see the hammer leg in there. And you want to make sure that you put your spring over that, like so. And then you're just going to take your cap and you're going to put it back in. It's usually a good idea to make sure you orient the opening here with where that is on the, where the pinhole is on the frame. And get this back on there. Get that to go in there. Hold on just 1 second. I may not have it over the leg there. Okay. Fit this. This shouldn't be that tight. There. Okay. So now you just do the reverse. Put your pin back in. Hold on just a second here. I must not have it lined up properly. So, and that's all there is to doing the D-spring. What I'll do is I'll get my trigger gauge out and show you the difference that it makes. It's not going to make a huge difference on this gun because I already run I think a 12-pound spring in it. But you'll see the difference that a spring can make. I don't recall what the factory trigger weight is for the double action, but that will lessen it quite a bit and make it much, much smoother. Like I said, I've upgraded everything in this gun, so I'm not running a factory trigger to begin with. But we get the trigger gauge out. We'll measure this spring, and then I'll put this one back in, and we'll measure that one, see what we get. This is just a Wheeler trigger gauge. I like the digital one because it goes up to like 20 pounds. So if you're working on old surplus guns, the trigger pulls on older guns were awful. On new guns, you can get away with the analog one because but they only go up to like 12 pounds, which anybody that's ever used a Nagant revolver will tell you that you'd break the trigger gauge on one of those before you'd get a reading out of it. So to use this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook the trigger with the arm on this, like so, and I'm just going to pull back and let it complete its cycle. Okay, you'll see there I have a reading of 10 with 1.7 ounces. So that's a 10-pound double action pull. And you do it several times. And let me just delete. I don't want to restore that data. So 914.
You can mostly see the screen.
Okay, that was 1058. So you do several of them, and then you get, that was 874. So you can get a swing. You have to be careful using one of these things, and I wasn't necessarily doing that, but you want to make sure that you get this notch in the same place on the trigger every time, because the trigger pull is different from down here than it is up here. So you want to try to get that aligned properly. I don't know, does this show you where I'm at?
It's close.
Yes,
We can see.
yeah, I can see it. 993, 98, 9134.
9134.
Yep. There's no glare. There was a huge glare when you're doing the other way.
That was probably my bald head. I want to get down here. 914. So let's swap that spring out and see what we get off of this spring, because I honestly don't remember. I think this is like a 12-pound spring, which is I think even lighter than the D spring. So let's go ahead once again. To do this, you just push down on that knob, push the pin out, remove it, swap your spring. You can see this spring is a little bit shorter. The one I'm putting in, or the one I just took out, is a little bit shorter. So our trigger pull will probably get a little bit stiffer with this spring, but we'll put it in there just to see the difference that a spring can make. And this is a really simple upgrade to a gun that you don't need to pay somebody to do. If you just have a bare minimum of hand tools, kitchen table, put that back in. So that spring swapped out. Okay. Delete. Do this one. I'm gonna have to see if I can get this where you can see it. Okay, that one is 8. 9, 4, 8, 9. So this spring might be a little bit lighter. 8. So we're getting consistently 8 pounds on the double action here. Yeah, so 813, that's pretty consistent. I might just leave that spring in there since it seems to be a little lighter. This one could be just worn out too. I put quite a few rounds through it. But another nice upgrade to do to these, if you're having problems with certain ammo, you get light primer strikes. You know, if that's happening frequently for you, you can upgrade this trigger bar right here. And what it will do is it has a higher notch here, so it pulls the hammer farther back, and it's giving it even more travel than the factory trigger lever or trigger bar. So Wilson Combat sells the trigger bar. I personally would just get the they make special ones to also adjust the trigger travel. So I believe this is a short reach trigger bar, which means that it moves your trigger back just a little bit, so you don't have as far of a reach to hook the trigger. But like I said, it also gives you a more trigger or more hammer travel. And I also have the skeletonized hammer on here. But anyway, that's a nice little upgrade. And Wilson Combat sells a lot of really good parts, or like I said, Langdon Tactical. But you know, that's just some things about the Beretta that you could think about upgrading. And thought I'd show you the D-lever. Are there any questions up to this point on these things?
There are a couple of questions.
Okay.
One's from Lil Marco. He wants to know if there's a way to keep the safety and make it single action only.
Oh,
Well, you stumped him.
yeah. I'm trying to think how you do it. I don't think so. I know you can. They make a version of it that's double action only, but I don't know why anybody in their right mind would do that. I think a lot of
here's
people, go ahead.
For normal operation, right? If you're you put a full mag in, chamber around with the safety on, it doesn't decock, and the hammer is back. So wouldn't you just push the safety forward, pull the trigger, and you're in single action from the beginning?
Okay, what are you saying? So I pull my hammer
With the
back.
normal, with your normal action before you did the G mod, I think is what you called it.
Yeah.
If you put a full mag in, chamber around with the safety on, your safety's on, your hammer is back, correct? So you're going to be running single action from the beginning.
Yeah.
Or is that not correct?
Yeah,
But I
that's
think
correct.
if I remember correctly, if you flip the safety on, when you flip the safety off, it decocks it. I'm trying to remember. And then you're back in double action only, or double action mode, and then you won't be back in single action until you fire around. So you're talking about carrying it in condition 1 with the hammer back. What he's asking about is you want to condition 1 with the hammer back and the safety on, so all you have to do is flip the safety off.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
No, it's going to decock it, and then you're going to be back in single action mode.
Yeah. It's not like a 1911. It's not like
Yeah.
a 1911. You can't do that. Not with the Beretta.
Yeah. But they're great guns. I mean, the double action pull on these really isn't that bad. They get a bad rap from the military. You'll hear a lot of service members, they hate this gun and I think because the ones they got were 30 years old and beat to hell and run hard, and you know, and they're just junk. But a civilian one isn't going to see that kind of use and abuse. Like I said, my friend runs, you know, she ran 25,000 rounds through one last year, and it still runs great. But she takes very good care of it. She tears it all down and replaces all the springs in it, and keeps it running right. But you'll hear a lot of military people that hate the M9, just despise it. But it's a bad rap.
Gotcha.
And
The next question was from someone who has a Beretta, it looks like. They want to know how often they have to completely disassemble it beyond the basic field strip for cleaning and whatnot.
Oh, I wouldn't do it except maybe once every 10,000 rounds. Or, it depends on how much you use it and what conditions you use it in. If you're using it in wet and dusty, muddy, outdoors running it hard, I'd probably think about doing it maybe once a year. But I put, this gun 5,000 rounds a year through it. And I clean it pretty regularly. But I think anytime that you get in a position where you're changing your recoil spring, and I think these go about 10,000 rounds. I would think if you're replacing your recoil spring, it's probably a good idea to just take the gun apart and clean it.
Those are the two that we've had so far.
Okay, that's my take on it. Yours could be different. If the gun's still clean and operating smoothly, there's, just do your field strip, and there may be no reason to really take it completely apart. A lot of people never do. Some guns never get cracked open and run just fine. Older revolvers, some of those I don't think have been opened in 80 years. People just manage to get a little oil in them and keep running them. They're kind of a closed system, so there's not the only way to get stuff in through it is into them is through the trigger and the hammer. So, I don't know how necessary it really is to take a gun completely apart unless you're really using the heck out of it. All right, well, let's put this thing back together. So, of course, your grips. And if I need to tell you how to do grips, we're probably in the wrong place. But once again, like I said, get some little O-rings. Oh, the O-ring's still in the grip here. Get some little O-rings, and this works great on 1911s too. And I know some people with really fancy grips and stuff want to align the screw slots. It drives some OCD people nuts to have one screw slot vertical and one horizontal. This is the way you can overcome that. Put some O-rings in there, and then you can align them and still have enough tension on it to hold them in place. And
while you're putting the grips back on, another question was about how many rounds or how often should you be replacing springs and other parts that will need semi-regular replacement?
I would replace the recoil spring about every 10,000 rounds. The manufacturer should have a recommendation on their site. I run SIGs most of the time, and they, I think, say 10,000 rounds. And they're cheap. A recoil spring is really cheap. They're $7 or $8. Other springs, I wouldn't replace them unless they're worn, unless you start having problems with them. I'm trying to think in a Beretta, maybe your trigger spring now and then, but that one, this trigger spring is not fun to replace. This is a bit of a cursing match to get this one in there and get these legs aligned properly. But I wouldn't do it on the rest of the springs on this gun unless you have problems with them, honestly. And I think that goes for most guns. Unless the manufacturer should have some guidance on periodic maintenance on their websites, and they'll tell you what they recommend for maintenance. Oop, I got to get that pin down. The pin is in my way. I generally about once a year I do the SIGs that I have. 1911s. 1911s I think are about 5,000 rounds is the recommended interval for those.
Agreed, as someone who shoots a 1911 quite a bit. Same guy that has a Beretta, or gal, because all I get is a name, so apologies. I'm finding stovepipes and double feeds more often than I want. Do you think it's the extractor?
No, it's probably your magazine. I would take a hard look at I would ask, are you using multiple magazines that happen on all magazines, or have you tracked? So what you would do is take multiple magazines, and whenever you have a stovepipe or a double feed, well, your stovepipe may be the recoil spring. It may just be worn out. I would replace that. That's cheap and easy. And then start keeping track of your magazines. Usually feeding problems are more mag related than they are anything else. I doubt the extractor's worn out on it. I think that would be a stretch unless if it's a relatively new gun. You can take a look at it. Let me get the barrel out. You can take a look at it, and I'll show you mine so you get an idea what it's supposed to look like. Inspect it, maybe check and see if there's any crud in this gap right here. If this is showing up, where the rim of the case would be, and then check the shape and make sure that that's not deformed. But beyond that, I don't know. Unless this is incredibly worn, I wouldn't think that would be too much of a problem. I would think that it's probably mag related. Most of the time, feeding issues are worn magazines or bent feed lips up here. Maybe go through all your mags and look at the feed lips and the followers. And if you see something with a weird geometry, pull it out of service, or just mark it and keep an eye on it and see if it causes problems regularly. And then in which case just get rid of it or make it a malfunction training mag.
The other option for that is for some magazines, they make rebuild kits if it turns out it's the spring and or follower.
Yeah.
So you don't have to buy a completely new one. I don't know how expensive the Beretta magazines are.
They're not horrible, and there's a lot of surplus military mags on the market too. They're not hard to get. They're really nice factory mags with the super, like this has a coating from the factory that is super slick, like a Teflon. And let me think if I have another Beretta mag up here. That's another one of these. These are the other style. They're just sort of a blued metal. And these snag up and don't drop free quite as easily. And the finish gets worn off. But whatever they're doing on the newer series of mags is very smooth and polished. These are really nice. So if you find these, grab them. But they're not terribly expensive. They're not like a H&K or SIG or some of those mags that are just stupid expensive. Let's get this back in the right place. Another previous in older iterations of this gun, the 92S, these locking blocks would crack or break. They've since mitigated that in the 92 FS and 92 F series guns, so it's no longer a problem. But on the old 92S guns, you'd have problems in this area. So it's something, if you have a 92S, keep an eye on it. Let me get this back, please. What's going on with this one? There we go. All right. But this just goes back together like most guns you're used to. Special.
It's after the 1911.
Well, yeah, they're not. I don't know. I'm so used to them. And lubrication on these. I put a little bit of gun grease on the where the slides in these rails. I put I should have told you this before I put it back together. Beretta recommends just a drop of oil on the tip of the firing pin, just a little drop right there, not much more than that. You don't want to get a whole bunch of oil up in here because it will attract crud, but just a little drop right there. And then I like to put a little bit of grease, just a thin coating of grease on the barrel, because you can see here where this finish is worn off. You know, it's like a parkerized finish, and that's where it's sliding through here. So I like to put a little bit of grease on there just to try to keep it as smooth as possible. Let me get this back together. I always have to do things at weird angles, but Ed enjoys it because it usually launches something across the room. Oh, come on in there. We got a little bit. There we go. And then your slide just slides back on. You flip your lever up, and it's back together. Function check. Reset. There we go. So that's pretty much it. They're not that hard to take apart. If you tackle the, this is probably the hardest to do of the whole series that I've done on this gun, is this decocker only G-lever mod, just because of the tediousness of getting these little detents and springs seated properly. But the trigger job in a bag is a lot of disassembly and reassembly, but it's not bad, and you don't really need any specialized tools. A set of punches, a nylon hammer, trying to think, not much else to it. A good pick with a hook on it, like something like this, is really handy to get in. And dental picks, you can find dental picks that have it. It's a lot of times it's a good thing to have to kind of lift one of those spring legs and get it where you want it without kinking it or bending it. So, you know, there really isn't much involved tool wise to take one of these completely down and put them back together. So I think that's pretty much it on the 92s. I highly recommend them. They make a compact, which is a little bit shorter slide and a little bit shorter. This is a 17 round capacity, and I think the compact is 15 rounds, a little shorter here and a little shorter in the frame, but identical gun otherwise. And they're a little heavy. This has an aluminum frame and a steel slide and barrel, so they're a little chunky by today's standards. If you're used to polymer guns, this will be quite a bit more of a handful, but it can be carried. It's not the most practical thing in the world for that, but if you're going to compete in IDPA or USPSA, they run great. You will want to practice on any DA SA gun. You're going to want to practice that double action trigger pull. Practice it, because when you see people screw up with these, it's always on the first trigger pull, the double action. And most competitions are going to make you decock it and put the safety on. And so you're always going to have to shoot that first shot double action. So train on it, get used to it, get to where you can hit as accurately with that as you can the single actions. And I think, aren't CZs the same way? I don't own one. I've never shot one, but I think CZs are the same way. So if you
The hammer fired ones are, yeah.
Yeah. So
They do make a
and so
single
are SIGs.
action. For the CZs, they make a single action only though as well, with a conversion kit.
which is,
So it's more like a 1911 in that sense.
yeah. SA single action's my favorite. But if you have a double action gun, practice with it, because if you ever take one of Alessandro's classes, he's going to make you fire that first shot every time in double action. So don't game it by pulling the hammer back. You know, don't waste your time. Learn that double action pull on any double action gun, and you'll be better for it. But
Or just use a striker fired gun, but whatever.
yeah. Well, if it's a double action, single action, practice the double action pull, or you're just wasting effort, you know. Anyway, any other questions?
Yeah, you got the same problems on your SIGs, on your older SIGs, your 226s, your 229s.
Yeah.
There was another question here, going back to those O-rings. Little Marco apparently missed it the first time as to what size that you used for those, or did you have a kit?
I don't
Where
know.
you can get like
I can measure it for you. We can pull one out and measure it. And, but you know, you can go just take one of your grip screws into Ace Hardware if you have one, and match it up. I'll give you a measurement. I'll pull it off.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
It's just Mark.
Yeah, it's just Mark.
Yeah,
But let's go ahead and do it because
he's already here.
Point
he's already
two,
doing it.
0.23, so it's a quarter of an inch. If you can see that. And then, I don't know, thickness wise, probably it's not going to matter. This part doesn't matter. All you're wanting to do is get a little bit of rubber in there to give it some friction, just to give it a little extra bite. And that way you don't have to tighten your grip screws down nearly as tight.
And so if anybody wants to give Scott that kind of guff, you got to be a member so you can be on the chats that we're going to read live.
Oh, is somebody making fun of me?
No, that would be Mark. Yeah, that would be Mark.
What did he say?
He wanted you to repeat the O-ring thing. So
Oh, well,
not paying attention is part of his charm.
okay. Well, good.
And if you're a member, you get to be made fun of live on stream as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Join us in the Discord chat and do it live, do it real time. All right. Well, that's pretty much it. Unless there's any other questions. I think that pretty much covers it. I don't know what else to say about the Beretta M9 92 series. They're really good guns.
Now, if nobody's got any questions, we can go ahead and wrap it up early.
Okay. Any other questions not related to the M9 or 92?
Yeah, how long is it going to take you to drive down, Scott?
9 hours.
Yeah. All right. So on that note, I think we're done for the night. Everybody's welcome to join us in the Discord pub for after dinner drinks, as it were. Danny, what do we got next week?
Next week, we're going to have Scott right back here, and he's going to do an AMA for us. We had a lot of technical questions during our club leadership AMA, so we have saved them and started soliciting more. And Scott's going to answer all of our questions about mods and sizes of O-rings and ammo and reloading and anything we can possibly come up with that's on the more technical end of things. We're going to inundate him. And then the following week, October 27th, is going to be our monthly diversity panel. It's going to be the African American gun owner experience. Really looking forward to that one. So that's October 27th.
So next week we got a pub with Scott, but the week after we get new people and interesting people.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then maybe by the week after that, all the parts will be in for the trench gun.
It's got to be here soon. I called and left him a voicemail and sent him an email saying, "Yo, bro, I get it. You said it would be a while, but come on, you know." But if not, I've got other things that we can talk about, other guns I can take apart and struggle with for your viewing pleasure. So,
all right. Well, on that note, I think we got all the questions. Danny's got us set up for the next 2 weeks.
All right.
And it's time to go ahead and kill the feed.
Very cool.
If
Well done,
anybody has
Scott.
any other questions, drop into the pub on our
Well
Discord
done.
server. You have to be a member. Oh, I never put that in the link. I'll put
No,
the-
We
Danny,
got it.
Danny
We
put
did
the
it.
link. Danny and Kyle
Danny's,
put the link in.
Danny's smarter than I am, so thank you.
Yeah. Danny and
Um,
Kyle put the link in.
Thank you. So we'll see you on the Discord server, and we'll see you next week if we don't see you sooner.
all right,
Thank you,
then.
everybody.
Talk to you soon. Bye.